One of the topics that I have been discussing since the beginning of this war, that I've been really focused on talking about on this channel, is the ideology of the Iranian regime, understanding the particular brand of apocalyptic Shiite ideology that they adhere to, and how that impacts the way the war has been fighting. There was an interview that I did on Israel 365 News with Dr. Mordechai Kedar that I've been talking about. I even played a piece of it in one of my videos on this channel. I encourage everyone to watch that video where he talks about the ideology of this regime, this particular brand of Islam. And it was in the background, I would say, of the remarks by President Trump today in a cabinet meeting, as well as in the remarks by Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And they didn't mention 12 or Shiite Islam. They didn't mention it by name, but you can tell from what they said that they have internalized that the administration is messaging and is very well aware of what they're dealing with in terms of the ideology of the regime. And that is very good news. And we're going to get into that in this video. We're going to play those clips. And while I'm mentioning Israel 365 News, it gives me an opportunity to encourage you to go over to that channel. A lot of my best content, a lot of great content is up there at Israel 365 News. And there's a lot of great interviews and videos that are similar to what we do on this channel. But a lot of in-depth discussions. Recently, we uploaded a great interview I did with Nick Freitas, and the video our most recent video is a very important one. It's a background video about Lebanon to really, all this stuff you hear about Hezbollah and disarming Hezbollah and the government there and Iran's involvement and all the chaos in Lebanon. So what I do in that video is I get into why Lebanon is this way, how it became that way, and it's important historical background. 15-minute video. Go look for that. And of course, the video that I mentioned, go find that video of the interview with Dr. Mordechai Kedar. It's from 2 weeks ago. Mordechai Kedar on Islamic Jihad. You could really learn a lot. It's a game-changing interview. All right, let's get to President Trump from today's cabinet meeting. Here we go.
And just so we set the record straight, because I've been watching the Wall Street Journal's fake news and all these stories that get printed like, oh, I want to make a deal. They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal. But they say, oh, we're not talking to them. Anybody would know that. And only a total fool. And they're not fools. They're very smart, actually, in a certain way. And they're great negotiators. I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. And they are begging to work out a deal. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. I don't know if we're willing to do that. They should have done that 4 weeks ago. They should have done it 2 years ago. Or they should have done it when we first came into office, because 2 years ago they had free reign under Biden. Sleepy Joe, worst president in the history of our country. What he allowed to happen to our country at the borders, and even with a thing like this. But not just him. Every president for 47 years, every president should have done this. They should have done it a long time ago, because you cannot give lunatics a nuclear weapon, and they would have had a big one. It stopped really when we did the B-2, but even before that, the Barack Hussein Obama, what he did where he gave them the Iran nuclear deal, gave them free will toward a nuclear weapon. Basically, he chose Iran over Israel and others that didn't want him to do it. But I terminated that deal. Had I not terminated that deal, you would have had a nuclear weapon years ago, and it would have been used, guaranteed. And one of the reasons you know about the guarantee is because their neighbors were sort of like bystanders. They weren't involved very much. They didn't choose heavy sides. They didn't want to, because people were concerned with Iran. There was a big black cloud over the Middle East. They were concerned, but all of a sudden the worst.
When President Trump says that they would have used it guaranteed, and that one of the ways you know that is that they attacked all of their neighbors unprovoked. So when we talk about Shiite 12 or Islam, and if I've mentioned this in other videos, I'll explain it more in detail soon. That's what I'm talking about, that he understands it. because they have an apocalyptic vision of Islam. They want to bring maximum chaos and bring the apocalypse to the world. So when he says they would have used the nuclear weapon guarantee, there's a lot of people who hear that and they think it's hyperbole. That, Pakistan's a Muslim country. It has a nuclear weapon, but they don't understand the difference between Sunni and Shiite Islam. I'll explain more in a moment, but suffice it to say that this brand of Islam in Tehran would use a nuclear weapon. And that's what President Trump is signaling here. He said this before. So at this point in the press conference or in the cabinet meeting, I was like, okay, it's good to hear that again. But then he goes on.
And they start shooting at these five countries. They start shooting at Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Oman. They start shooting at them, and everybody was shocked, including us. You know why? Because they're sick, and they had a plan to take over the Middle East. And some of those missiles that were shot at them were locked long before we even started this process. They were locked and loaded and aimed at those countries. They wanted to take over the Middle East, but we happened to come along, so it wasn't so easy. So right now their Navy is sunk in the largest elimination of a foreign Navy that has taken place, maybe ever, but certainly since World War II. Their Air Force is gone. Their anti-aircraft and communications capabilities are totally dismantled. And one of the problems they do have when they deal with us is we deal with people and that people aren't able to communicate with anybody else, because all of their leadership has been gone. The first level is gone, and they met to pick a new level, and they're gone. They're all gone because they didn't make a deal and because they're sick people. They're really sick. They're really sinister, sick people. And if anybody thinks it was okay to have a group of people like this to have nuclear capability, nuclear weapons, and if we didn't attack with the B-2 bombers, they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks of that, maybe 4 weeks. But between 2 and 4 weeks, they were planning to have a nuclear weapon. If we didn't hit them at that time with the B-2 bombers, and one of the great air raids in history, maybe the greatest, dark at night, no moon, no light, every single bomb hit its mark and just obliterated that place. So it's now buried deep under earth. And it was an amazing thing, but they would have a nuclear, and they would have used it without question. And you know that because why did they shoot all these countries that weren't even really involved with them? They weren't involved. They had no big problems because they're sick, because they want to take over the Middle East, not just Israel. Certainly Israel would have been the first on their list. They would have used nuclear weapons, a nuclear. You don't need too many of them. But they would have used a nuclear weapon on Israel, and they would have used it on the neighbors. And then they would have come after us. And if we had a weak president, they would have done great damage. But fortunately, you don't have a weak president. I knew what was happening.
So everything President Trump has said there, he has said before. But notice the emphasis. Notice how much he's emphasizing and coming back to the danger of Iran, because these people are crazy. They would have used the weapons. And look at all the countries around them they attacked. They would have used it on America. They would have used it on Israel. He's leaning into this. And then he goes on to other aspects of the war and even other topics that are unrelated to Iran. And then at the end, after his remarks, he asked J.D. Vance to say a few words, and he asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio to say a few words. And look at what they used their few minutes, each of them, to say.
So, J.D., please.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. It's good to see everybody. Proud to be part of this team. Proud to be serving the president of the country. Let me just say a couple things. The first of all is the president summarized this very ably. But look, the Iranian conventional military is effectively destroyed. They don't have a navy. They don't have the ability to hit us like they could have even a few weeks ago. And what that does is that gives us options, Mr. President. Now, there's been a lot of reporting about diplomatic options, about negotiations. There's, of course, Pete and his team. There are further military options. But what we have now that we didn't have when the president took over just a little over a year ago is the ability to use every tool at our disposal to ensure that Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. Because when I say options, I think it's important the American people know options for what? and its options to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. You talk about people who walk into a crowded supermarket and have a vest on, and they blow up the vest and a couple of people get killed, and that's a terrible tragedy. What happens when what's on the vest is not something that can kill a couple of people, but can kill many, many tens of thousands of people? That is the most important American national security objective that exists for any administration at any time, is you don't want the worst people in the world to have a nuclear weapon. That's why the president is doing this. That's why the president cares so much about this particular issue. I'll let Steve talk a little bit about the details of the negotiation, but the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Marco is I'm very mindful, of course, that we have a lot of folks overseas fighting very ably for the United States of America. I know Pete and the whole team, we're very proud of them, but they're fighting at a time where we are about to enter as Christians the most important week of the Christian calendar, the Holy Week that celebrates the return of Jesus Christ to Jerusalem. And so I want to say to all of my fellow American Christians, but particularly those serving in the Gulf, that I wish you all a very blessed Easter, a very blessed Holy Week, and we continue to stand behind you and continue to support you every step of the way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Marco?
The most important job any president has is to keep the American people safe. And every president says it, but we have a president that means it and does something about it. As the president outlined very clearly to the world on the night this operation began, Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years. For 47 years, Iran has been killing Americans and attacking Americans across this planet. And other presidents had an opportunity to do something about it. And they all warned about how Iran was dangerous, but they refused to act. And this president's not someone that's going to refuse to act. He's not going to leave a danger like this in place. He's going to address it, and that is what he is doing. From the very first night of this operation, the president made it very clear. People like this, and now what I'm talking about is not the people of Iran. The people that run this country are radical Shia clerics. These are religious fanatics. Look what they are doing now at their weakest point. This is the weakest Iran has ever been. And look at what they're doing. They're attacking embassies. They're attacking hotels. Imagine what these people would do if they had a nuclear weapon. That is an unacceptable risk for the world. By the way, the president's not just doing a favor to the United States and to our people. This is for the world. He defined very clearly on the first night of this operation what the goal was. We were going to destroy Iran's Navy, and that is happening. We were going to, if it hasn't already happened, I'll let Pete speak to the specifics of it. We were going to destroy their missile launching capabilities. We're well on our way to achieving that goal. We were going to destroy the factories so they couldn't make more missiles and more drones, and that is moving forward. Every single objective the president clearly laid out on the first night of this operation is being effectuated. Again, Pete will speak to the specifics of it. This has been an incredibly successful operation. Every day, it may not get covered because, we're unlike them. We're not bombing embassies and hotels. We're hitting military targets. But every day, the Department of War lets the drummer get wicked over every portion of Iran that has these military capabilities, and the results are going to bear fruit for the world. The world is going to be a safer and a better place when President Trump's mission here is achieved. And frankly, I think countries around the world, even those that are out there complaining about this a little bit, should actually be grateful that the United States has a president that's willing to confront a threat like this and not allow it to continue to persist. Because these people will kill as many Americans as they have a chance to do. And if they have a nuclear weapon, as the vice president pointed out, they could kill millions of Americans in the future. And that is a risk that was not going to continue to exist as long as we had this president.
Okay. That's Secretary of State Rubio. Okay. Now, this is huge. There's a huge difference between Sunni and Shiite Muslims. I brought up before the example of the question, well, Pakistan's a Muslim country and they have nuclear weapons. And there's other bad actors in the world who have nuclear weapons, right? North Korea has nuclear weapons and Putin has nuclear weapons. And, so when Trump says if they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it. When J.D. Vance says if they had a nuclear weapon, it doesn't just mean large nuclear warheads. Once they have a nuclear weapon, they can also create smaller tactical nuclear weapons. And that means that their proxy network of terrorists all over the world, Hezbollah operatives in Venezuela and Paraguay, suddenly nuclear weapons are in the terrorist network. When they bring these things up, this has everything to do. When Marco Rubio talks about the radical Shia clerics who cannot have a nuclear weapon, this has, and they're all bringing up the ideology, right? J.D. Vance is talking about like they would blow themselves up to kill other people. They're firing at all their Sunni neighbors. So what does this all mean? So in the interview that I did with Dr. Mordechai Kedar on the Israel 365 News channel, you have to watch it. No one's following this war closer than I am, okay? Maybe there's a lot of people following it closely. I'm following it very closely. And I felt that when I spoke to Dr. Kedar, that there was how I understood this war before that conversation, and there's how I understand it afterwards. If you haven't seen that interview, you have to go watch it, okay? Dr. Mordechai Kedar on Israel 365 News, go find that video. Here's what he explains in short about this type of Shiite Islam. When you hear about Muslim terrorists, jihadists, that if they're martyred as martyrs for jihad, they'll get their 72 virgins right in heaven or whatever. That's a Sunni way of thinking. The Sunnis are concerned about jihad, about transforming the world, getting it all under the governance of Islam, and they're willing to risk their lives. They consider it an honor to give their lives for jihad, and then they're concerned about what happens to themselves in the afterlife. That is not the focus of this brand of Shiite Islam. This 12er Shiite Islam, they believe that there were 12 imams. The 12th imam went into hiding, and he's forever alive in hiding and will come back. He's a Messiah figure, and that the goal is to bring the Mahdi, and that's the focus of their faith. That's the focus of their religion. Sunni and Shiite Islam are so different that many experts consider them different religions. In fact, they consider each other different religions. It's not like, Presbyterians and Episcopalians. It's not like conservative Jews, Orthodox Jews. It's not like that. They don't consider each other different denominations of the same religion. They don't even have the same Quran. There's two chapters of the Quran in Shiite Quran that don't exist in the Sunni Quran. And so when you see all those countries that they're attacking, so why are they doing it? So I asked this question to Dr. Kedar. Why are they doing this? And he said, the way you bring the Mahdi is, again, the goal of Sunni Islam is to control the world, convert people to Islam, right? Jihad that way, right? No, the goal of Shiite Islam is to bring the Mahdi, and you bring the Mahdi by bringing the world to a point of apocalypse, to bringing the world to a point of abject chaos and apocalypse. And that is what summons the Mahdi. Okay, so understand, these people out of piety in their faith believe that their goal is to sow maximum chaos. So notice that the large networks of the schools and the mosques and that you see in America and in Europe, most of that is Muslim Brotherhood. That's what you hear about. The Muslim Brotherhood is Sunni. These are 12er Shiites. What are they busy with in the Western Hemisphere? Drug running, human trafficking, and they're constantly killing, launching this chaotic war. So when they get attacked by America and Israel, and they feel that this could be the apocalypse, that this could be the big one, think of that type of thinking. So they start firing at all the Sunnis because, as far as they're concerned, this is going to bring maximum chaos to the world. Their goal is to bring the Mahdi. So imagine if the entire focus, the primary focus, the highest yearning of this faith is to bring apocalyptic chaos to the world. Of course, they'll use a nuclear weapon if they have it. That's why they're so singularly focused on it. Because you wonder why. Why did they let their economy collapse and let to the point that their people are willing to rise up the way they did, and yet they're still spending all their money and they're single-mindedly trying to build greater and greater weapons, more ballistic missiles, faster production, restart the nuclear program. Why are they so singularly focused? Because they are 12er Shiite Muslims, and this is what they believe. And when you see in the comments of Marco Rubio, of President Trump, of J.D. Vance, the way they're talking about these people, the way they're talking about the way they think, they are getting it. They're understanding it. It's becoming part of the policy thinking, of the direct, or at least of the messaging. It probably already was part of the policy thinking, but you see it now. Here. Let me say it simply this way. You see this event here, this cabinet meeting. So President Trump gives remarks, about 15 minutes worth of remarks, 18 minutes worth of remarks. And he covered a lot of topics, and he covered the Iran war in depth. I only pulled out a clip of President Trump, but the clip did show that he was emphasizing this point about how crazy these people are and how much chaos they're sowing and the irrational nature of their behavior and how they can't have a nuclear weapon. And he said a few times, maybe 3 times, he said, if they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it, and they would use it on us. He's emphasizing that. He's leaning into it from a messaging perspective. J.D. Vance is given a couple minutes to speak. What does he focus on in his speech? Right away, what does he go for? The fact that if these people had a nuclear weapon, you'd have terrorists blowing themselves up with tactical nuclear weapons. And then what does Marco Rubio focus in on? These are radical Shiite clerics who would use a nuclear weapon. They would endanger the whole world. Of course they would. This is their religious faith. This is what they believe. This is what they want. Meaning using a nuclear weapon for them is not an act of desperation. Or actually, if you're making this argument to a friend, here's the best thing to say. What's the danger of Korea having a nuclear weapon? Kim Jong-un doesn't have a nuclear weapon because he wants to use it. He has it because it provides a shield. It provides cover for him to have his dictatorial, brutal regime. He can't be, it's very hard for there to be a coup. An outside, you can't pull an Iran on him, no matter how bad he is to his people. And he's number 1 on the list of countries that persecutes Christians the worst in the world. Christians are killed. I mean, it's the worst country. I mean, North Korea is terrible. He oppresses everyone, but people can't do anything about it because he has nuclear weapons, right? Nuclear weapons, that's how most countries use nuclear weapons. It's a deterrent, and it gives them a cover. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, from that perspective, yeah, they'd be safe. But none of these people, like Putin doesn't want to use a nuclear weapon. Pakistan doesn't want to use a nuclear weapon. But these are 12er Shiites. They want to use a nuclear weapon. That's the point of this. And you see the administration is getting it. It's such a critical point. Go watch that video. Again, it's on Israel 365 News. It's from about 2 weeks ago. Dr. Mordechai Kedar on jihad. Very, very important video. Go ahead and watch that, and you'll understand so much deeper, because he goes really deeply into it. I think it's about a half-hour interview. We get deeply into Shiite versus Sunni Islam, what these people believe. And my final point about 12er Shiite Islam is that it's a small percentage of Muslims worldwide. It's less than 20%. All Shiites are 20%, and not all Shiites are 12er Shiites. But you know who is a 12er Shiite? This crazy ideology I just told you about? Zohran Mamdani. That's right. And I've talked about that in some other videos. But Zohran Mamdani is a 12er Shiite. And Robert Spencer has said, Robert Spencer, a great expert in Islam, you should be reading his books now, because right now the big struggle in the world is Islam, and no one's a better explainer of Islam than Robert Spencer. Find his books and read them. Robert Spencer said, before Mamdani was elected, he said, you'll see that if he gets in, or when he gets in, there's going to be chaos in New York. And we've seen that. There's going to be more and more chaos, and people are going to think that it's because his policies are failing. But it's not. It's intentional. He's a 12er Shiite. This is what he believes in. Sowing chaos to bring the apocalypse. And that's who, and you can't let people like that have any power. And I think the Trump administration is now signaling that they are understanding that. All right, thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, all that great stuff. And thank you for helping grow the channel.